Welcome back. All right, Evander Kane. His name is right now all over the hockey world, and this time it's because of what's going on the ice. This time it is for positive reasons. So, beacon of positivity here, absolutely, that's fine, no problem. Wearing Oilers gear, the whole bit, and it's good to be able to talk about Kane from a positive perspective. But immediately, all of the armchair GMs online want to say, well, wait a minute, why didn't this team take a shot? So, back when San Jose buys him out after the 2020-2021 season, 56 games, 22 goals, 27 assists, 49 points. And rumor had it throughout the season he wasn't very popular in the locker room. And this is where I'll bring up the point that when a team's winning, a lot of those locker room divides aren't a big deal. We saw that in Vancouver this year. Boudreau takes over, they start winning, and all of a sudden all this locker room divides and who's on what side kind of goes away. So winning does a lot to gloss over whether or not you like a certain player on your team, whether or not this feud in the locker room is good or bad, right? So Kane ends up playing for the Barracuda. There's a lot of other things that take place. And again, I've done videos on all of the other stuff. This video is not about all that other stuff. And so there's a lot of stuff that was going on with him and has been going on with him for years. But nobody's ever questioned his ability on the ice. Nobody's ever questioned his ability to put the puck in the net. But that being said, would he be a perfect fit if he's a free agent this summer? Let's say he goes to the market. Would he fit into every single locker room? No. I think Kane is a guy who will excel on certain teams in certain situations, and we're seeing that with the Oilers right now. He's playing with McDavid. He has a chance to get passes from Draisaitl. He's a sniper. This is a perfect setup where, yes, if he stays with the Oilers next year, he could hit 50 goals. He could hit 40. He could hit 50. And again, it's because it's kind of a perfect setup for him, right? So in that last year with the Sharks, he was one of their better goal scorers, one of their better offensive players, but the team decides we're ready to move on from this. And there's a lot that leads up to that. So his career kind of in flux. And the last time we saw him in the playoffs, he played 20 games in that run for San Jose in 2019. 2 goals, 6 assists, 8 points. And I remember in 2019 a lot of comments about, oh, Kane's not built for the playoffs. He's not tough enough. Kane, in the big games, he just disappears. Where was Evander Kane? He's not worth this. He's not worth that. So as quickly as people right now will say, what an amazing run he's on, and look at this guy, and this is great, and why didn't the Canucks go out and get him? 3 years ago it was, well, he's not really a playoff performer. So it can change quickly. And honestly, it's one of those interesting things I think about sports fans is how quickly they'll change their opinion on a player. And if the Oilers lose in the next round, so if the Oilers, let's say it's Edmonton and Colorado, and I'm just throwing that out there, and those series aren't over at the time of recording this. But if Edmonton gets blanked by Colorado and Kane doesn't get a goal, some of the same people that right now are talking about how great he is at his goal scoring are going to then say, well, yeah, he was able to score against Calgary and against LA, but then they played a real team when they got out of the Pacific Division, and then it wasn't so easy. So that's how quickly things can change. And whether it's true or it's not, that's where the narrative ends up. It has to be frustrating for a professional sports player, of course, but I'm sure that their oodles and oodles of money make them feel better. So this year for the Oilers was a very good year for him. 43 games after they picked him up, 22 goals, 17 assists, 39 points. And in the playoffs thus far, 11 games, 12 goals, 3 assists, 15 points. But I have seen a lot of, and it seems to be mostly on the Canucks side of why didn't the Canucks pick him up? Shouldn't the Canucks have picked him up? What would have happened if the Canucks picked him up? I'm not sure it would have worked as well. The Canucks, their core is a little bit younger, and the expectations in Vancouver aren't quite where they are in Edmonton, and I just feel like it's a really good setup in Edmonton. It just is. It's a relationship that works. At some point during the offseason, I'll talk about players where maybe they didn't fit in very well with one team or another, and then all of a sudden they find that perfect fit. Or players who had a perfect fit moved on somewhere else and it didn't work out. Now in Kane's case, I think the Oilers are a perfect spot for him. So I'd be kind of surprised if he hits the market. I'd honestly be very surprised if he doesn't work out a way to stay in Edmonton. It's mutually beneficial to him and the team to keep Kane around, because he's scoring the goals. Notice we haven't heard any controversies with Kane. I might be jinxing it. Yes, I might be jinxing it. but there hasn't been any controversy since he went to Edmonton. There's the possibility that Ken Holland talked to him before signing him and said, look, we just want you to play hockey. Can you guarantee us we're just going to hear stories about hockey? And all that other stuff, we're just going to be able to put it aside. And Kane probably said, fine. Because the funny thing is this. We always see the talks about Kane. We hear about certain players and their off-ice conduct. And so these players are this and these players are that. Hockey players in the National Hockey League are there because they're the most talented hockey players in the world. Their personalities, their flaws, if you want to say it's a personality flaw or a perk, depending on your point of view regarding certain things, it really, I don't think it factors in for GMs nearly as much as it does for us as fans. I think GMs look at, and in this case it's Ken Holland, he looks at Kane and goes, he's a goal scorer, he plays on the wing, and I need a goal scorer on the wing. So done. And then he signs him to a contract that in retrospect looks pretty darn good, right? So Kane right now would be justified in going back to Ken Holland and saying, look, I like it here, I want to stick around, I feel I deserve this amount of money, and then they work it out from there. And again, I think it would be smart for the Oilers to keep him, and it'd be smart for him to decide to stay there and realize this is his best chance. Sometimes players will have a really good season somewhere, and then they're like, okay, I'm going to hit the market, and then it ends up being a bad decision. Where maybe they get that big paycheck from another team, but they don't perform very well, the contract gets bought out, and the team where they had really good chemistry and things were going well, they've moved on. They've got other players now, and maybe they don't have room for you later. So I think that whole striking while the iron's hot is important, and so I would be very surprised if he doesn't stay there. But again, it does not change my opinion that Evander Kane might not be as solid of a pickup for the Vancouver Canucks, that may not work. Because it works in one locker room doesn't mean it works in another. Just like if you went to San Jose and said, well, would they want him back? The answer could still be no. The answer could change, but the answer could still be no. But I always find that interesting that when these stories take place immediately, there's, okay, this instead of viewing it as this is a good story for Kane and for the Oilers, it's, well, why didn't this team pick him up? Well, why didn't he go over there? Well, why did that team let him go? Well, that was stupid. Rather than just saying, good pickup, smart move, Oilers. They're in a position to maybe make that conference final. And again, I don't want to jinx anything. I don't want to, even the perception of jinxing things. So they're one game away from knocking out Calgary and getting a shot at likely Colorado. Well, why not? The Oilers, I remember coming into this series against Calgary. Well, they're not against the Kings now, so it's not going to work out so well for them. And it's worked out pretty well after a really rough game one. But what happens in the next round? We don't know. Do I think Colorado beats Edmonton? Yeah, probably. But until it happens, we really don't know. So, again, I mean, you guys can let me know your thoughts regarding the topic of Evander Kane, but I find it weird that instead of celebrating the fact that he's number one in goals in the playoffs right now, that a lot of the conversation becomes, well, what about that GM was stupid because he didn't sign him? Okay, but again, does that put them over the top? Does that help a team make it into the playoffs that was below the line? And again, with Kane, it really does. It's one of those divisive names. And again, when something happens involving Evander Kane in a game, and I'm watching the game, writing it on the board, I know it's going to be a topic of discussion afterwards, and I expect a lot of discussion on this topic. I also expect him to stay in Edmonton. Let me know your thoughts. Where do you think Kane ends up? Does he stay in Edmonton next season? What does his payday look like? What kind of contract does he get? Or where else do you think he'd fit in? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. For me, if Kane was going somewhere else, to me it would have to be a team with a lot of veterans, good leadership, and an ability to, if any of the stuff that we hear over the years, if any of that kind of behavior was there, that those veterans could pull him aside and say, hey, so, keep him focused. Because when Kane's focused, he is a fantastic goal scorer, as we're seeing in the playoffs. But again, it doesn't necessarily work for all 32 teams. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, it's been a fun playoff so far. I think the fact that the Oilers have so many redemption stories on them at the same time, and there are a few, I think that's fun too. But let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.